Okay, in this video, I'm going to give a couple cues on the PAILS and RAILS, the end range isometric contractions that we do in the functional range conditioning system to help improve mobility and strength, resilience of the joints and the tissues in their end ranges. And I'm going to use the quad / hip in the half kneeling position for the first one and give a couple cues using the Swiss ball, and then I'm going to lay down on my back and I'm going to use my desk here behind me for the hamstring variation, just to help give a little bit of visual and additional audible cues to help make this click a little bit more. So the first thing with our PAILS and RAILS is talking about the actual process. Step one is just a deep stretch, just a hold in the stretch. And that's going to look like, for our quad in the half kneeling, it's going to look a lot like what's called, this is commonly coined the couch stretch from Kelly Starrett, because you can have your foot on the back of on the seat part of a couch and your knee right in front of the couch. Or you can be in a more of a standing position and have your knee in the butt of the couch and your foot up the back of the couch where your head goes. But this is just a deep stretch for the quads. It's also sometimes called the hurdler stretch. Anyway, we're just hanging out here. Step one in a PAILS and RAILS contraction is to just hang out in the stretch. We're just getting the tissues and the joint prepped for the isometric work, the contractions that we're about to do, by giving it a little time to relax and soften into this position, get comfortable. I like to use a Swiss ball, key note here, because it's soft and contoured for the top of the foot, and you can push down into it really easily to get your first contraction, which we'll talk about. And then when you pull away from the ball, when you're pushed down, it compresses a little bit and it dips in, it concaves in. And then when you pull away, it concaves out. So it's continually pushing out to meet your foot, which is just encouraging more feedback to continue to remind you to engage the other muscles as you pull away from the ball. So I like to use a ball. You can use any object behind you, but the ultimate goal is to get all the way into your end range of motion, whatever that is, where you feel a really deep stretch here. The goal is to get the foot elevated more, or the body leaned back more. What we're trying to do is get a closed angle. We're trying to close down this knee angle back here. That's going to put more of a stretch on this quad stuff. Here, much less of a stretch on the quad stuff. As I come back, stretch, feeling it, feeling it, feeling it. I could even elevate this foot a little bit more with a higher ball. I just grabbed the small one out of the dojo for this video. So I'm not even fully at my deepest end range here. I do this stretch a lot. I work on this a lot, so I've really opened up a lot of capacity here. This feels really comfortable for me, so I could even challenge it a little bit more. That's step one, is just the deep stretch. We hold that for 1 to 2 minutes. One on the minimum side. I'll give you minimums and ideals because time is a factor sometimes, and I'd rather have you do something than nothing. So at least 1 minute hold, up to 2 minutes ideally. After 2 minutes of a hold, we go to step two, which is the actual isometric contractions. So the first contraction is always contracting the stuff on the larger end of the angle. The progressive angle is the bigger angle. So if we're looking at the knee being the angle here, the short angle is right here on the back side of the knee. That's my hamstring stuff. It's a really tiny angle, right? We're looking at like 45 degrees or less, 30 degrees. And then on this other side, 180 would be my legs straight down, and I'm all the way back here. So I'm at like 2 something. Okay, so this angle, long story short, is much bigger on the front side. This is the progressive angle, and this is the regressive angle back here behind my knee. So progressive angular isometric contraction just means I squeeze and hold the stuff that is responsible for being on the side of the big angle. That'd be my quad stuff here. So the first contraction is kicking down into the ball. And with my progressive contraction, I ramp it up slowly. I usually recommend people come out of their end range deep stretch a little bit come out like 10, 15 degrees. So that way we just reduce risk of injury and pulling something, especially if we're new to these contractions. The second safety tip is when we do the progressive contraction, we ramp up slowly from 0% contraction to 80% or above, depending on your tolerance level and skill and strength. And so it's like a gas pedal going from a red light through the red light in traffic. You know, you're accelerating 5, 10, 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour. It's a slow, consistent, gradual build. So for my contraction, I usually tell people 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 hold. So it's about 5 seconds of a build up there. Minimum for your PAILS and RAILS contractions would be about 10 seconds. So like a 5 second build up and a 5 second hold. More ideal would be like 20 seconds, where you're doing a 5 second build up and then a 10 to 15 second hold, where you're really fighting. Okay, so I'm kicking down on this ball, 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50, hold as hard as I can, hard as I can, hard as I can, hard as I can. We're at about 5 seconds, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then I go into my RAILS contraction, which is squeezing all the tissues isometrically on the regressive angle, which again is this short angle back here. So I'm flexing my hamstring, trying to pull my foot off of the ball. But it's an isometric contraction. I'm already at my end range. Isometric means no movement. So if I can lift my foot off the ball, I'm not at my end range of motion. So I should be able to fully contract my hamstring without the foot lifting off of the ball. What I'm actually trying to do is pull myself deeper into the stretch. As I shorten this angle, it's not actually because I'm lifting the foot off the ball towards my butt. I'm actually pulling my butt closer to the ball. What is that doing? It's creating a deeper stretch on my quad, right? Yes, you can get a deeper stretch on your quad kind of by lifting the foot, but you're not at your end range of motion when you're doing that. If you're leaning back into a greater end range of motion than you had before, you're teaching your nervous system to give you more access, not just, decent dynamic utility of the access you have by moving the foot up off the ball, but actually pulling yourself into a new and greater range of motion than you ever had before. And that's the whole point of PAILS and RAILS, is we're trying to increase capacity, which is the amount of space we have access to at our end range of motion, so I can get deeper knee flexion and hip extension in this position, and also resilience. By using the contractions, we're actually creating a strength training like response that makes the tissues stronger and more resilient in those positions specifically, which is great. That's also what we want. So think about it more as pulling yourself deeper into the stretch rather than, in this example with the ball, pulling the limb away from the object you're pushing into. You're trying to just get yourself deeper into that stretch. So then when you go into your next PAILS contraction, you're at a new end range of motion and you're fighting to create stability and resilience in that tissue with another isometric contraction in a new, deeper stretch. That's, whoa, now you're really feeling it. Okay, so PAILS contraction, we push down into the ball for this example. We build up slowly with all our PAILS contractions so that way we're safe in the joint from 0% up to 80%, and then we hold for, and that takes about 5 seconds, and then we hold for another 5-10 seconds. With the RAILS contraction, we're not as concerned about the buildup because we're on the short side of the joint, so it's not as intense on the tissues. They're already in a short position. These ones are long and stretched, so we've got to be careful not to crush down with speed and potentially pull them. Here, they're already short. We're not worried about pulling our hamstring in a short position. We're going to feel, if anything, the hamstring cramp, which you probably have felt. And so on the regressive contraction, we don't need to build up slowly. We can just go right into the regressive contraction at full speed. So we build up slowly with the PAILS, kicking down into the ball. We hold, and then we go into RAILS, and it's just right into my hamstring contraction. And then I slowly try to lift my foot off the ball while pulling myself deeper and leaning back more into a greater range of motion for the stretch. Okay, and this, if you're using a ball, it's good to have something like dowels to push into, or a foam roller works really well. in the vertical position here to use as something to push into and give you some balance, or you can just use a wall or grab onto something. But the rails contraction we hold for another 10 seconds minimum, up to 20 seconds. Very similar to the PAILS contraction, but we just don't build up going through that contraction. So 10-second hold minimum, and then we go back into our PAILS, slow build, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, hold, max hold for another 5, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, okay? And then we rails again. Do at least 2 PAILS and rails contractions each, and always finish with your rails contraction on the short side, pulling deeper. Do up to 3 PAILS and rails contractions, and then finish with your rails contraction. And then the step 3 after PAILS and rails is another deep stretch. We've just increased our range of motion, right? Ideally, we've pulled ourselves into a greater range of motion. We've created some strength and stability in that position. So now we've got this new temporary access to increased range of motion into a deeper stretch for those joints. So what do we want to do? We want to hang out there for a little bit, at least 1 minute, ideally up to 2, to help recondition the fascia with a new range of motion, with a new access to a greater stretch of those tissues. So we hang out there for another 1 to 2 minutes so the body can get used to and familiarize itself and stretch into and soften into this new, deeper position. We're trying to get it to permanently remain rather than just temporary access for like a warm-up for a workout. We want to keep this new range of motion we just worked on accessing. So by hanging out after the stretch, or after the PAILS and rails contraction in a deep stretch, we help our body adjust to and memorize and learn and get familiar with this new, deeper, greater range of motion in the greater stretch that we have in the joint, in the tissues. So we just hang out for another 1 to 2 minutes. So looking at our step-by-step, step 1 is a 1 to 2 minute hold. Step 2 is PAILS and rails contractions. PAIL, slow build for 5, hold for another 10 to 15. Rail contraction, hold for 10 to 20, right into it. And then another PAIL, and then another rail. And then if you want, optionally, you can do another third PAIL and rail. And then step 3 is another 1 to 2 minute hold. So let's look at minimums here. 1 minute hold in the front, step 1. Step 2 is 2 PAILs and rails at 10 seconds each, right? So that's 20 seconds per contraction, 40 seconds for 2 of them. And then step 3, another minute hold. So you can get away with doing a PAILs and rails in just 3 minutes time, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You could even add that third set of 20 seconds and make it an even 3 seconds for your PAILs and rails, right? 10 PAIL, 10 rail, 10 PAIL, 10 rail, 10 PAIL, 10 rail is 1 minute. So you got 1 minute hold, 1 minute PAILs and rails, 3 sets of 10 each, 10-second hold each, and then 1 minute of another deep hold. Okay, so 3 minutes minimum. Now let's look at ideal, more of maximum if you have the time. 2 minute hold, 3 contractions at 20 seconds each would be a minute 40, right? 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, 40, 40, 40. Let's do some math here. Is 120, so that's 2 minutes, right? 40, 80, 120. Am I right there? So we've got 6 contractions, yep, 20 seconds each, 2 minutes. Doing math on the fly. So we got a 2 minute hold, 2 minutes of PAILs and rails, 3 sets of 20 seconds each, and then 2 minute hold again. So that's 6 minutes. So we can essentially just double. The minimum is 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. The ideal is 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. That's the easiest way to think about it. And 3 minutes with just 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute is great. If that's all that you've got the time for, you've got like 6 minutes. I'm gonna do 3 minutes on each quad. Cool. If you've got more time and you're working on increasing your mobility as a primary focus for your programming in the training phase that you're in, it would probably merit doing the 2 minute, 2 minute, 2 minute and spending more time in those positions to accumulate a greater range of motion and build more capacity and resilience in those end ranges. Or you could break it up and do 1, 1, 1 in the morning at one part of your day or in the beginning before your workout, and then 1, 1, 1 again at the end of the workout because we're just accumulating time under tension. That's ultimately the most important thing. The more time under tension, the more adaptation we occur, that we gain, that will occur. So you can play with this. I want to give you some adaptability. It's just step 1 is a hold, step 2 is PAILS and RAILS contractions, step 3 is your hold. And hopefully the PAILS and RAILS contraction explained gives you more understanding of how to make those work. Now I'm going to give one more example on the hamstring just to really nail the point of the end range and deepening into the end range. So I'm going to use this table here and use my hamstring, and what I'm trying to do is find a good end range of motion where I can feel a good stretch here and I'm not compensating a bunch in my leg. I could probably go a little deeper, so I'm going to scoot my body this way, which is going to bring my leg this way relative to the stretch. If I go deeper this way, it's naturally pulling my leg. If someone were holding my leg, it'd be the same kind of idea, but we don't have a super friend. We're doing it by ourselves. If you've got a super friend, you can have them push on your leg. Okay, now I'm feeling a bit of a stretch in my hip flexor here, which is nice, and a bit of a stretch in my hamstring here. Okay, so what would I do? Step 1, I would hold this contraction for 1 to 2 minutes, right? And then my PAILS contraction, if we look at the hip, the short angle of the hip is right here. We've got 90 degrees on this angle, right? And then if 180 would be this leg sticking straight out, if I'm looking at this angle, you can't quite see because it's behind this other leg, but this is 180 right here, this leg straight. This back leg is at 90 here on the front side. And so on the back side of the leg, we've got 180 plus 90 is 270. Long story short, the backside angle is my progressive angle, my big angle. So I'm going to be contracting my glutes and my hamstrings here first in the PAILS, and then my RAILS contraction is going to be flexing my hip flexor and quad stuff. Now, I want to make a key note here. You have to get far enough into your end range of motion to feel a deep stretch so you're at your end range of motion, right? Because my PAILS contraction, I'm going to kick my foot into this immovable object to get my hamstrings and glutes to fire, and I'm going to build up from 0 to 80%, and then I'm going to hold. And then when I go into my rails, I'm going to fire right into my rails and contract my hip flexors and stuff. And what's really common is people will do this. They'll just lift away a whole bunch, or maybe even more, because they have that range. That means A, you're not at your end range, or B, you've accessed new range by going into that deep PAILS and RAILS contraction, and you should be able to slowly over time access more range. So what you do if the leg comes off is instead of just holding this RAILS contraction and then going back to the next PAILS contraction at the range of motion that you had access to prior, that isn't now your deepest, greatest end range of motion, because this is, right? So what do we do for our next PAILS contraction? We got to scoot down more, and now I'm in a deeper contraction at my new end range of motion, so I can track my PAILS again. And then I go to do my RAILS, and that's a more appropriate rail contraction where I'm flexing really hard, but my leg's not actually able to lift off. I'm barely, I don't know if you can see that on the video, but ooh, okay. So what I would do, I'd scoot another inch for my third and final RAILS contraction. PAILS, now I'm in a deep hamstring stretch. I can really feel that. And now I go to RAILS, and I can't even get my calf to get off of the table. Right? Which is good because it's an isometric contraction, which means no movement is occurring from the outside looking in. Of course, there's subtle movements happening on the inside of the body. There's little adjustments and contractions and lengthening and shortening of tissues, but you don't see any movement from the outside. An isometric contraction is no movement. So I'm contracting all this tissue as hard as I can here on the regressive angle, but no movement is occurring because I'm already at my deepest end range of motion. So the key takeaway for that is, and it's the same thing with the exercise ball, is I leaned back more to close that angle down rather than lifting my foot off. Same thing here. Rather than lifting my foot off, I scooted down more to get into a deeper end range of motion. So certain movements for PAILS and RAILS, depending on what joint and what position you're in for that joint, is going to require some noodling around to get to an end range of motion. This is another great example since we're here for the shoulder, the sleeper stretch. This is a really common internal rotation stretch. So my progressive angle is this stuff. My regressive angle is this stuff. Smaller angle, bigger angle, right? And so I want a PAILS contraction by going this way, slowly building up. And then my rails contraction is going to look like this. I'm going to be pulling away from that immovable object. Just like the foot was pulling away from the desk, my hand is pulling away from my other hand. So what do I do when I go into my next PAILS contraction? I bring the immovable object down to where my hand is in its new accessible end range of motion. And then I start my next PAILS contraction. And then I go into rails and see if I can get away a little bit more. Oh, I got a little bit more away. So rather than just coming up into the rails, next PAILS contraction, I bring the immovable object down to my new end range of motion that I just got access to, and I do my next PAIL and then rail. And then by the time I do my third rail, I'm probably not getting very far away. Just like I wasn't able to get away my calf from this on the third set, same thing here. Like that's now I'm really at my end range, okay? That's good. That's what we want. We want to find out what your true deepest end range of motion is and then contract all the tissues maximally against an immovable object in that end range of motion without any movement occurring. So I hope that helps clear some things up. If you got any questions about PAILS and rails or strength training or mobility training, drop them below.